With the assignments that you guys were given the last 3 days, how far did you guys get with those things? Did anybody get all 3 of them done?
Yes.
Okay.
Some questions on getting into some of these airports. In Helena,
Okay.
so I just ended it with just HLN. And it was the ILS approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty confused on how to get into Helena.
So what do we do when we don't have a SID or a star?
You have to write it every single day, right?
Well, that's not necessarily. That's when you have a SID or a star, but it's not going into SkyVector. That's kind of different. But as far as writing out your air traffic control flight plan, when you don't have a SID or a star, if we're leaving an airport without a SID, where do we go to first?
The VOR.
Yeah, the nearest VOR. Which ties us into a jet route, that we want, that's going to go the direction we want to go. Okay. If we're going into an airport that doesn't have a star, it's the exact same thing. You want to go to the nearest VOR that, like a Victor route or a jet route will take you to, that's closest to the airport, and then from that VOR, direct to the airport.
Just the 2 dots. And just go
direct and then KHLN. Yep. So I know some of you had been including like your landing approaches and things like that, like in the actual air traffic control strip part, like when where we write it out. The landing, the runway, and the approach that we use, they don't necessarily go in there. The only thing that it ends with is just whatever VOR or star you're using, and then the airport.
Oh.
So, how about the other 2?
Another question is, you want us to use SIDs and stars. So if I got a route that goes straight into San Jose or whatever, so my jet route goes right into the city, but I can't connect that jet route to a star. So
Is that on Helena?
Do I can use a star?
He's talking about San Jose.
Oh.
Could you use a Victor route?
Well, what you want to look for, first of all, when you know that you're going to, when you have a star we always want to use them when they're available, right? And we base that off of like the quadrant, that we're either taking off from or landing in. So if you have a star available in San Jose to use, before you even do that middle section of the flight plan where you're doing the jet routes, you really need to do your star first, because you need to figure out where your star begins before you go connecting your jet route. Because you will see a lot of times that the jet routes and Victor routes will take us right into an airport, but the problem is we can't file them that way if there's a star available for us. The only time we can do that is when there's no star.
So
kind of like Helena.
The best star to the best jet route, even if there's something shooting right straight there.
Exactly, yeah, because most airports do have stuff that just shoots straight in there, but the problem is most airports can't have airplanes just doing that. That's the whole reason they have stars, is because they need to separate that traffic and get it coming in and routed on those certain routes, because if everyone was just coming straight in, then it would just be mayhem at the airport, like for ATC. Yeah. Yeah, so if whatever one, the thing is if there wasn't, it depends on what side you're coming in from. So that one for San Jose, that was coming from what, Denver, right?
I think so.
Okay, so you're coming in from Denver, so you're talking about an eastern SID for San Jose. I know that there's a SID that connects to the Coldell VOR, which is that same VOR we used for, Portland. We used it for San Fran. So there should have been a star available for San Jose going right into the Coldell VOR. So,
There's LAX, right? Denver LAX.
Okay.
There's a note.
Yeah, unless there's a NOTAM, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless there's a NOTAM.
I don't think there was. At least not.
I don't think they'll have notice for the stars or SID, right?
They do those are in the FTC NOTAMs.
Yeah, so like 2 pages.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yep.
They were all city stars for the rest of the time. That's all it gets to the stuff together.
So let's take a look then at let's see here.
Are you working tomorrow?
No. I don't work till Tuesday.
That's nice.
Yeah, my days are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I have Saturday, Sunday, Monday off.
We're gonna go sit on Sunday tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
You still have the link for that GoToMeeting?
Uh-huh.
Can you resend it to me? For some reason it's like, it's not in my email anymore. Or I can't find it.
Let's see here. I can't find where it's at either. Okay. Let's see if that. Okay, so drive. So which one do you guys want to look at? We'll look at one of those three you guys did, and we'll hurry and run through it.
Denver.
You want to do Denver, LA?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna finish the Phoenix, the Seattle one, or?
Well, before we go on past that step, I want to make sure you guys have the first part. So if you guys, that's the, I mean, if you guys don't feel good about those first steps up through the weight and balance, then I would rather get you guys good on that before we go past that. So what would you guys rather do?
That makes sense.
I agree with that.
You want to do the review?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we'll know if we're doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take a look at Denver, LA. There's our air conditioning. We're going to turn it off.
Yes. Either way, I'll wait for you to stop.
That's church downstairs. Yeah.
I think you just hold it for a minute, and then use the tape. Just hold all that water in your mouth. Well, then.
So careful, we needed something that
Okay. So here is the route briefing. So let's take a look. I'm going to kind of show you how fast this should go.
Yes,
These
please.
first part, okay? So I'm going to open up a new flight plan packet real quick as well. Okay, so here's that. I'm going to leave that in here. Okay, so first things that we want to take a look at. So this is, you're opening this up for the first time. We're seeing Denver to LA, Ontario as a possible alternate if needed. Okay, so Ontario weather's listed at the bottom of this. So we've got aircraft number N764 Sierra Kilo, 50 adults, 10 kids, 120 bags, 500 pounds forward cargo, 1 observer, no MELs, ETD 1625 Zulu. So just looking at this real quick, 1625 Zulu, I'm leaving Denver. I'm going to while I'm here looking at this, I can just hurry and look at my METAR, and I can see 10 statute miles, few 1,500, broken 4,000. That's VFR weather. I know that I don't need to take off alternate right off the beginning. Okay? As far as the weight and balance and this stuff here goes, we'll come back to this stuff when we do the weight and balance, and once we know the fuel and the flight plan, we'll come back and grab that stuff. But MELs is the big thing I'm looking for right now, right there. First thing you want to look at, basically your first 3 items you want to look at with every single flight plan are going to be, 1, your estimated time of departure. Okay, just quickly check, do you need a takeoff alternate? Are you even legal to launch at your origin, right? Weather is good in Denver. That means we don't need a takeoff alternate, and furthermore, we're obviously legal to launch out of Denver. Okay. Second, MELs. Okay, you want to know your MELs. You want to know your restrictions right at the very beginning, because you could have an MEL that could make the entire flight not flyable, and you want to know that before you start going and figuring out a plan and everything else. Especially if it's like a weather restriction, you might have an MEL that isn't necessarily a restriction of flying the flight, but it might be a restriction on how you route the flight. Okay, so you want to know all that right at the beginning. So 1, your weather, your origin weather, are you good for takeoff without needing a takeoff alternate? Okay, we're good there, check. MELs, this one, no MELs, we're good. Okay. Number 3, in this case, is you want to check your destination. So now this is what I do before I even go diving into NOTAMs and anything else. I want to know, can this flight even operate? And those are the 3 things that tell you this, okay? Your origin weather, your MELs, and your destination weather. Right off of the bat, that's what you want to know. You want to know, is this flight legal to go? If it is legal, do I have the restrictions NOTAM-wise? And 3, does it need an alternate? Okay, you want to know those things within the first 30 seconds. Okay, so we already know about Denver. It's good. Even if you look at the TAF for Denver, it's expected to be good, but we're leaving at 1625 Zulu. So weather for Denver is currently good and expected to stay good, even if you look at the TAF. There's no MELs, which obviously saves a lot of hassle looking that up. And then we're going to scroll through this huge stack of Denver NOTAMs and get down to LA. Now, remember, we do not know our ETA yet. We don't know it. Okay, we haven't figured that out yet. But this is where we just, in our own brains, use a little bit of just common sense of geography of what you know. Okay, so I'm thinking Denver, LA in my head. How far do I think that is, guesstimation-wise?
2 at the most.
2 to 3 hours. It's probably similar to that one we did the other day, Phoenix to Seattle. Okay, thinking it's probably about the same. So just looking at the LA TAF here, I'm leaving Denver at 16:25 Zulu. Even if I fast forward 3 hours, that's going to put me 19:30 Zulu, maybe 20 Zulu with a taxi out. So let's go down and figure out where that's at. Well, here's 1900 Zulu in LA. Okay. Even if we went out to 20 Zulu, it's still going to be this same line because the next line doesn't start till 0300. So really, I'm pretty confident that if I went from here forward, this is basically covering the next, let's see, 23. So this is basically covering the next 6 or 7 hours if I go just to the 1900, because the 1900 is going to run all the way to 259 Zulu. So from 259 going backwards is greater than 6 statute miles. Even in this one, it's greater than 6. And even this one, which I know that, we're going to land there after 1700 because I know it's longer than a 35-minute flight. So really 1900. That's really where we're looking. That's our ETA without even knowing how long the distance is or what the precise exact ETA is. I'm 100% confident that it's going to be in that line of the TAF because I know it doesn't take 7 hours to fly to LA from Denver. And so that right there tells us wind 260 at 12, greater than 6 statute miles, skies clear. It's the best possible weather you could ever get into TAF. Greater than 6 with skies clear. So now we know it doesn't need a destination alternate. It's legal to go, obviously, because that's the best weather you can get. So it's definitely going to be above our landing minimums. Doesn't need the alternate. We know we don't need a takeoff alternate, and we don't have any MELs. So we know now this flight is good to go. Okay. So with that said, now that you get that out of the way in the first couple of minutes, because if you do have something restrictive, right, that makes the flight not legal to go, whether it be an MEL item or whether it be landing minimums below, like if the weather's below your landing minimums, or let's say the takeoff weather is below, your minimums there as well for your takeoff minimums, then that's something that if you're in the practical test setting, the examiner is going to expect you to voice that probably within the first 5 minutes. And if you're going past 5 minutes, and really it's probably long, he'll probably give you more like 20, 25 minutes. But if you haven't said something about an item that you should know about that makes the flight not even operational completely, you need to say something to the examiner immediately, because if the longer you go, the more he's thinking that you missed it.
Are we going to do something?
Yeah, your final in this class is a mock practical.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So how many do we do in the actual practical? Just one?
You just do one flight plan.
So if it's not even able to go, then just okay?
No, because what you do is if you have a no-go item, let's say it's an MEL that makes the flight you can't operate it. You're going to go over to the examiner and you're going to say, hey, this MEL is not going to allow me to fly this flight. And the examiner's going to go, okay, well, I'm going to swap your aircraft and I'm going to give you this plane, and now you're good. And then you're going to continue doing the flight.
Oh, okay.
It's a real life scenario. If that happened really in dispatch, that's exactly what you would do. You go tell the system controller, and you would say, hey, Adam, this plane has a no icing MEL. There's no way this flight can operate in no icing because I got thunderstorms everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to, okay, crap. Well, let me give you 782. That one doesn't have any MELs. You're good to go. You're going to swap planes. You're going to continue doing the flight plan. If it's a weather scenario where the weather's not legal, then I'm going to say, okay, well, let's delay an hour. Or I'll say, well, when is it legal? And you'll go back and look at the TAF. Well, if I delay it out to here and I arrive after 2200 Z, then my visibility goes up. At that point, it's legal. Then I'm going to say, okay, delay the flight 2 hours. Your new ETD is going to be this to match your ETA. There'll never be a scenario where you don't do the flight plan. Put it that way. It'll just be that scenario where if you don't go up and say something, then it's basically, it would be like an automatic failure. Does that make sense? Something that needs to be caught. But the stuff that is like that is glaringly obvious. Like if there's a no-go item there really isn't any reason you shouldn't know what that is outside of the first 5 minutes. That's the very first thing you look at, because you don't want to do any work if you got a no-go item, right? So we now know with this flight, there's none of that. So we're good weather, both ends, origin, destination, no alternate needed, no MELs. So now, because we know that we don't have any restrictions, we can go in, we know that we're going to be able to go in and fly the flight on the best possible route at the best altitude, best route, and then also after we get done doing that, we can start looking at our NOTAMs, and at that point it's just really getting down to the nitty gritty of like, okay, well, this runway might be closed and all that stuff, but you don't even care about runway closures if you have a no-go item. If you have an MEL or the weather's not legal, why would you even care about what runway you're going to take off at that point? So it's only once you know that this flight is going to operate on that plane with the current weather that you even dive into anything else. So with that, we are good to start looking at everything else. So what I like to do now, and at this point, the thing is about this, I don't want you to feel like you guys have to go in these exact same steps. I'm doing it. You can really, once you find out that first initial information, you can go now, like now we're at this point. If you wanted to go straight from here to the flight plan, that's fine. If you wanted, but the only thing is remember, like NOTAMs and things like that, like if you start doing a flight plan, you might have a NOTAM in there, an FTC NOTAM, that you ended up picking some SID that now you find out in the NOTAMs you can't use. So the best thing usually to do at this point is to go look at your NOTAMs now that we know that we're going to fly this flight. Okay, so let's start taking a look at Denver. From the top, remember I'm looking at this column right here. Okay, so Denver, apron, we don't care about aprons. Taxiway, we don't care about that. The next one's a runway, we do care. So what does this one say? Denver runway 17 right, and so this FICON thing here, that stands for field conditions, okay? This is basically telling us, you'll learn more about these field condition reports. This is something that you learn more about once you get into like advanced stuff, like actually, in airline ground school, because each airline has a different system of how they interpret this stuff. So it's not something we're ever going to cover in here, but all this is saying is that this is a braking action report. 5 is the best you can get. So 6 is the best you can get, but if it's a 6, you'll never see it in a NOTAM. The only time you ever see it if it's 5 or lower. And 5, we're talking like on a system of 6, 5 out of 6 is the second best you can get. So without really diving any further into that, this NOTAM is just saying that the runway is wet. It says 100% wet, observed at this time. So in this class, that's not going to really mean anything for us. Like, we're not going to take that into consideration. It's not saying that the runway's closed or anything, so we're good.
So all of them say that.
Yeah, so 17 left, same deal. 16 right, same deal. 16 left, same deal. Now, there are more runways in Denver than just these 4, but we're going to keep going along here. Taxiway, COM, remote outlet, that's not anything we care about. Apron, again, runway 7. So this one here, Denver runway 17 right, 35 left. Centerline marking, the south 4,000 feet is obscured. So this is kind of one of those ones that we were talking about on the quiz. Yeah, this is those white stripes in the middle of the runway that are they're obscured because the planes land and then they leave those tire rubber marks and they cover over the white stripes. That's basically what's happening. Now, this would be a NOTAM that we care about only if we needed the centerline markings to be visible. So what would be the scenario that we would need those centerline lights visible? Bad weather. And so that's the big thing that you guys got to remember too, is when we're looking at NOTAMs, really outside of a runway being closed, if you have good weather, there's pretty much no NOTAM that's going to affect you unless it's flat out closed. Like when you know that your weather is good at your origin and your destination, it doesn't really matter how many ILSs are out, how many whatever approaches are out. That doesn't matter unless you have bad weather. So just one way of you guys being able to kind of cut through the crap of the NOTAMs real fast is if you know you have good weather. Yeah, I mean, you're still going to have to read some of those because it's the ones our eyes are trained to catch, but you can quickly dismiss it, unless it says closed, then you really don't care. That's just one way of hopefully helping you guys be able to speed up a little bit more. Apron, taxiway, apron, taxiway, runway. So runway 8 RVR out of service. Same thing. We only care if it's bad weather, right? Runway 26 RVR out of service. Same thing. We got great weather and we're in daylight as well. So taxiway, runway 26 right threshold out of service. Let's see, threshold lights. So once again, it's a lighting thing. It's not something we care about. We don't have bad weather. 16 left, same thing, out of service. Denver apron, we don't care. Denver nav ILS 26, runway 26 out of service. ILS 8 out of service, don't care. 26 approach light system, runway 8 approach light system out of service, we don't care. 26 PAPI out of service, runway 8 PAPI out of service, don't care. Oh, and then we get to the bottom here. After reading all this crap about runway 26 and runway 8, we then finally learned that it's closed anyway. If they put this NOTAM right here, then we could have disregarded all of this. In fact, they could just put in this NOTAM alone and erase all of this crap, because we don't, even if this was working, we can't use it if it's closed. So anyway, runway 8 and 26 is closed. So the only thing that we got so far out of all of these NOTAMs that we've read, the only thing that even applies to us is just runway 8 and 26 is closed. So we do not want to use that runway for takeoff. So when the time comes to select a runway, disregard runway 8/26. Then Denver apron, taxiway, don't care. Okay. Now, FTC NOTAMs. Denver SID. That would be something we care about because we're going to have to use a SID in Denver. This is saying the plane's 8 departure, and just to avoid having to go look it up, the plane's 8 goes towards the plains, and so it's going to the east of Denver. So we're not going to go east. So we should know, once you look at that, you'll know that we don't care because that wouldn't be a SID we would use anyway because it goes east. Okay, next one is an RNAV. So this next one here is an instrument approach procedure. If it's an instrument approach procedure in Denver, you can immediately dismiss that NOTAM just by reading the first line. IAP right there, instrument approach procedure. We're not doing an approach in Denver because we're taking off from there, so dismiss it. Takeoff minimum, so that, let's see, what's this one? Denver obstacle departure procedure. Takeoff minimums, obstacle departure procedures amendment. So this is telling us that there's some takeoff minimums for, let's see, this one is, yeah, I just was looking for the runway 35 right. So, 30 feet AGL, just published. So, this is just simply telling us that we need to, it's not really a weather thing, it's just basically kind of a minimum climb thing, but it's not something that we really look at in this class. So let's see, 30 feet AGL, that's published. So when it's an obstacle departure procedure, and it's basically, if it's talking about like equipment like this, it's really just what it's telling people is that the plane, when it takes off, it needs to maintain like a minimum rate of climb, but that's not rate of climb and stuff like this is not something we don't deal with it in this class. So it's not something we're going to take into consideration. The next one is Denver instrument approach procedure. We're not doing an approach. Next one's an approach procedure. Next one after that's an approach procedure. Approach procedure again, 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 another one, another one, another one, another one. There's a SID right there. Denver SID, Denver International, the JMPRS2 departure is not authorized. I can't remember where that one goes, so we just need to know that we're not going to be able to use this departure. It's RNAV anyway, which we don't use in this class, so we already wouldn't be looking at it. The next one is approach procedure, approach procedure, approach procedure, approach procedure. So really, out of all the FTC NOTAMs, there was really just the one planes 8 departure, which goes to the east, which we're not going to use anyway. So there's no FTC NOTAMs that have any effect. So out of all the NOTAMs, the D NOTAMs and the FTC NOTAMs, the only thing was really just that runway 8 and 26 is closed. That's it for Denver. Okay. LA. Now, we also know that our weather in LA is expected to be good when we get there. We know that we don't need an alternate. So that's going to tell us a lot about what we do and do not care about with regards to LA's NOTAMs. Very first one, runway 6 left, approach light systems out of service. We don't care about that. ILS runway 24, category 2 and 3, not authorized. Same thing, we don't care. Another approach light system, a PAPI, and then boom, we have finally something that we care about here. Runway 6 right, 2 left, closed. Or sorry, 24 left, closed. Daily from 7:30 to 1300. So we're landing at, we don't know our exact ETA, but it's going to be somewhere between probably 18:30 and 20, right? Just to give ourselves a huge window there. We're well after the 1300. So this runway, this NOTAM, disregard. Taxiway, runway 24 right, approach light system, don't care. ILS, don't care. Aerodrome, airport, runway status light systems out of service, don't really care about that either. 25 right PAPI, nav ILS 25 right, 25 right ALS, 7 left PAPI, 7 left ALS, and ILS runway 7. Okay. We don't care about any of them because we got great weather. And now, NOTAMs, FTC NOTAMs, instrument approach procedure. Now, we are going to be landing in LA, so we do care about instrument approach procedures, but we have good weather. So we know that it's not going to really matter. We're not going to need an ILS or whatever the minimums are that this has any effect on. It's not going to affect us because we're landing in perfectly good VFR weather. So if the weather was crappy, then you probably would want to dig into an instrument approach procedure FTC NOTAM just to see kind of what's going on. The next one is an LA SID. We're not landing there. Another SID. Another SID. Part 1 of 2, but it's about a SID as well. Okay, don't care. Don't care. That's all part. This is all the same NOTAM, by the way. Next one is right here. Instrument approach procedure. Weather's good. Don't care. Another instrument approach. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. Here's a star. Now that's something we would care about. LAX star, Los Angeles International Airport. The Lena 6 arrival, FICI transition. Mickey transitions, Hypers transition, not authorized. Daisy transition, not authorized. So this is basically taking out all of these transitions on that star. And that's the Lena 6 arrival. So we just would need to maybe notate that, just put it on your scratch paper, just to when we're looking for an LAX star. We'll just, if we can, we'll just avoid even using that one completely. That would be the easiest thing to do. But if we do have to use that one, then we might want to come back and take a second glance at what those transitions are that we can't use. But first off, the first thing I would try to do is just not even use that star at all. It might be an RNAV, I'm not sure. The next one is a SID. Here's another star. This is the Buffy 4 arrival, is not authorized, so we would jot that down as well. The next one is a star, and that one is the, I think they call it the Angel 1 arrival. Add note. The CGNEY transition is ATC assigned only, so we would need to remember that. So yep. The next one is a star. Same thing. It's kind of I think it's a similar star, but it's also has that same exact transition, ATC assigned only. And this next one is the same thing, yep. Star on this one. The Ironman 1 arrival, change note, turbojets and turboprops only to read note. Turbojet aircraft only. So all of these, same thing, all of these transitions are assigned by ATC only. So hopefully we can just avoid using all of these different stars. So star, Sunset 1 arrival has the same thing. This one, a star, Zuma 1 arrival, kind of has the same as the other one. So there's a lot of different things with stars obviously going on in here, whether they be transitions that you can't do or transitions that are only assigned by ATC, the Goats 1 arrival, the Rider 1 arrival. This one's just talking about you can expect runway 24 right for landing unless otherwise assigned, lost communication. Star, only 1 arrival is not authorized. So again, about lost communication, instrument approach procedure, and then the River 3 arrival is also not authorized. Okay, so a lot of stuff going on with stars there. So now that we know more or less all that, we may have to circle back and take a look at those again, but let's quickly just jump in and do a route real quick. So in Denver, so that's our runway layout chart here. Denver's a pretty big airport.
I have a question about runways. And I forgot what you said, but the longer runways are used for landing or takeoff.
Takeoff.
Takeoff, okay. So you would probably want to pick one of those for a takeoff.
Yeah.
You want to pick the next side down.
Yeah.
Like in this instance, you'd probably take 3-4 right or 16 left or something.
Yeah, I mean in Denver, every single one of their runways is 12,000, except for this 3-4 left is 16,000. So really, you can't go wrong in Denver. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So really 12 runways total if you count both ends. But yeah, the big thing here, I mean 12,000 feet is plenty long enough. So the only one that we know of here is this one. This 826 is closed. So we're not going to use that one. And then now the next consideration is really just what's the wind. Okay.
150, 11 knots.
150 at 11 is our wind. Okay, so with wind 150 at 11, what would we want to use?
16 route.
You say 16?
Yeah.
I use 16,
Okay,
right?
okay. And you were probably basing that off of just the length and then the 160 being closer to the 150, right? Yeah, and that works perfectly fine. That's exactly the thinking that I want you guys to have. So, one thing I was going to show you guys here about Denver though, real quick, is that you remember how we were talking about the runway headings? You notice how these ones are. Well, you notice how this is 16 right, 16 left, and 17 right, 17 left. But you look at the headings, I mean, these are clearly on the exact same heading, right? Even though that says 17 and that says 16. So if you look at, let's see, what is it? Okay, yeah, right here. See that right underneath the runway number where it says 173 degrees?
Yeah.
That says
Yes.
173 degrees. And you look over here, it says 173 degrees, 173. That's telling you that's what the true heading of the runway is. So it's really 173. All four of them are the exact same, even though this one says 17 and these ones say 16. It's just like this one here. See, 26 is 263. Well, that matches pretty good. But then 25 right here is also 263. So that's really common at these airports where they'll number them, even though they don't have enough. They can't do like 16 for all four of them. They could if there was just three of them, because then they would just do left, center, and right. But when there's more than that many going the same direction, they gotta go to a different number. So really, you could use 17 right is going to be the exact same thing as even 16 right as far as your heading goes. And then the only difference about 17 right is that if you're right here at the terminals and you taxi out, you're right there, bang, bang. You can go get onto that takeoff. Instead of 16 right, you might have to go clear out, taxi clear up all the way to the north, and then clear over and out.
So that's what you base that decision on at that point?
Yeah, but as far as you guys are concerned, I mean, I don't want you having to care about taxi out like that. All of our taxi outs for all of our flights are just 10 minutes regardless of whether you're using that but in real life, that's kind of what you would look at if you were selecting a runway. So we'll just stay with the 16 right and 16,000 feet, okay? We know that it's open, we know that we can use it, and it's going into the wind. Okay? Next thing we want to take a look at is, since we just picked 16 right, we're now here on our takeoff minimums page. Now, I know that our weather is awesome, but because we still need to fill out that part of the flight plan packet, when we look at this here, so I see 16, so 16 right is right here by itself. So there weren't any NOTAMs, if you remember, that were really affecting anything in Denver other than just that runway closure. So in Denver, when we come into this chart here, sorry, not this one, but this one right here, this is the one where we're using our Denver weather here. Take a second to load that up.
What is this? What's that chart called?
This is where our airport decision, runway decision.
Takeoff destination alternate requirements form. Right?
Yep. Takeoff, destination, and alternate requirements form. So we're taking off from Denver. Okay. Our time of departure, 16:25 Zulu. And our weather is over 150 at 11 knots, right? And then 10 statute miles. And what was our clouds?
Overcast at 60.
What's that?
Oh, it was overcast at 60.
Overcast 6,000.
Yeah.
Overcast, yeah, 6,000.
Temperature,
11,700.
altimeter,
3036.
3036.
okay. Now we're right here. We're using runway 16 right for takeoff. Okay. Now, what are our standard takeoff minimums for this runway, for runway 16 right?
We select.
RVR 50 or more.
Yeah, RVR, what does that equal?
5,000.
RVR 5,000 or 1 mile. Okay. Standard takeoff minimums right there. We can, I always like to write RVR if it says RVR. So you can just put RVR 50. But if you want to just put even just the 1 mile, that's fine too. But either one of those is fine. Next one is our less than standard visibility. And that's going to be the adequate visual reference. So it's going to be RVR 1600 or a quarter mile. Now this one has the 2 spots here. So this is the less than standard RVR, which is going to be 1600. And then this is the visibility, which is going to be the 1/4 statute mile. Okay. The next one is going to be if we have anything better than that. Now we do have this, the 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, but we also have this, the Centreline lights and the, so we've got all the way down to 500, 500, 500. Now, in Skywest op specs, if you guys remember the op specs, Skywest's lowest possible takeoff minimums are 600, 600, 600. So even if you have an airport, like in Skywest case, even if you have an airport which goes lower, Skywest would still be limited right here to just the 600. That's the lowest they can go. So because it's a Skywest one, I like to just keep it what Skywest can do.
So when we looked at that, we had chosen the 10 or the 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 because it says Centerline and our Centerline our CLM.
And the first column doesn't have.
The RCLM.
So we just do the second one.
Because it says CL and RCLM.
On this one?
Yeah, on the chart that we're filling out. So it's CL and RCLM and the RVR out.
Above the TDZ and it's CL and RCLM. So we chose 1,000.
Where your cursor is.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically telling us what it requires. So Centerline and runway Centerline markings, any RVR out, other 2 are required. So it's basically saying if you have one of the RVRs out, then you have to have at least 2 out of the 3.
But because it says Centerline and RCLM, do we have to choose go back to
Just
the runway?
The first column doesn't have the RCLM listed.
Yeah, and the first column is just Centerline and HIRL. That one has the RCLM.
Yeah, but this is just if you have just these 2 things working though, then that's okay. That's what the airport is telling us. Because Centerline lights are better than runway Centerline markings. So if you have the lights, you don't need the markings.
So it's
If that makes sense.
for Centerline markings.
Yeah, like they sub for that. I mean, that's not something that you would know, obviously, by how you've been reading it. Like, I get exactly what you're saying, but it's okay to have the center. Like, if it's just telling us this is what we need and both of these things are operational, then that's all we need as far as the airport is concerned. On the chart here, this is basically telling us, see the runway, if you go back and look at the runway here, if we look at 16 right? So we've got centerline lights obviously here, but if you go back up, I think it's actually just on the left side over here. 16 right here has, so it tells us that it has the centerline lights. So if it has centerline lights, it means that it also has centerline markings. That's not something obviously you would know unless you just knew that, you know. So like obviously I knew it because you just learn it later, but centerline, if it has centerline lights, it also means that the centerline markings are there as well. So the thing about runway centerline markings, just the stripes, all runways are required to have centerline markings. So even the smallest, most podunk of airports has to have centerline markings. In order for it to be a runway, there has to be centerline markings. The only question for us is if those centerline markings are obscured or not.
So then why is it more, why is it 1,000 feet when you're looking at the centerline or RCLM? Like, what's the difference then? If the centerlines always have the RCLM, then what's the difference between the two columns?
This is meaning that in this column, your centerline lights have to be working. And they have to be on. Yeah, not every runway has the markings, but not every runway has the lights, if that makes sense. In the second one, you either have to have those centerline lights working, or you have to be able to see the runway centerline markings. Now, because every runway has centerline markings, just because it has them doesn't necessarily mean you can always see them, because they might. That's the situation where you have the NOTAM that says that they're covered or they're obscured, and that's always going to be because of rubber, like from landing skid marks. So that's going to be the only question. You can go look at a lot of runways and you can see where you can't see any of the stripes because of all the rubber from the people landing. And so they have to clean that off every so often, because if it gets too bad, then they have to put in a NOTAM that says you can't see the runway centerline markings. They're obscured. And if you have that NOTAM and you also don't have your centerline lights on that runway, or they're not working or they're out of service, then that's going to kick you out of this entire section completely. Because this one, you've got to have centerline lights. This one, you either have to have the centerline lights or you have to be able to see the markings. So if you couldn't see them, I mean, it's obviously a combination of two kind of rare things. But if you had let's say the runway didn't have centerline lights at all, like St. George is an example, they do not have centerline lights. But they have centerline markings, and you will see NOTAMs in St. George for like rubber removal from the runway, where you'll see the centerline markings obscured. And that would make St. George, if it were this runway, you'd have to get kicked out of that section. And then you'd be over here. So going back to this, we have the 600, 600, 600.
And that's because that's Skywest.
Skywest minimums.
500, right?
Yeah. Do you guys want to stay going for a few more minutes just to get through the steps that we know? I mean, it really probably won't be more than maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, probably. Okay, so that's Denver. We've picked the runway. Okay, we're good there. Let's go back. We've got this figured out. Zoom back out. Okay. And next thing we want to pick out of Denver is, oops, needed to stay in there. We needed to pick a SID that goes to the west. Okay, so here's our first one. This is the Yellowstone one that goes to the north. That's still Yellowstone 1. The Pikes 9 goes to the south. There's that Plains 8 that's not authorized right now. There's the Rockies 3, goes to the west. Now this one, the side goes like that, but anyway, we can start looking at here, and we've got, so this would be our, southwest most transition, which is probably where we're going to want to be going to LA, but Dove Creek is an option, Blue Mesa is an option. So if we just kind of know that that's what we're looking for when we go into SkyVector, we can kind of start at least getting our SID and transition in place. World high. Grand Junction. There's Dove Creek right there. So if we're looking at Dove Creek, so if the SID gets us to Dove Creek, then let's just follow it down J146. Dove Creek, J146, takes us down through Vegas, and from Vegas we can get onto whatever these other ones we need are. So let's go figure out what we're going to do in LA. So this is the Bassett 4. I don't remember any NOTAMs or FTC NOTAMs that affected Bassett 4. I know there was a lot of NOTAMs that affected stars, but I don't recall anything that affected Bassett 4. And this does come in from the west. That hits the Hector VOR right there. If you come back in here and see where we're at, that Hector VOR is right here, which is perfectly in line with where we're headed. So if this works, then that's probably the easiest one to use. So we'll just plan on using the Bassett 4. Okay, so should end up being a pretty easy flight plan. Okay, there's our direct line. We're going to be CKI3, right?
Yeah.
To Dove Creek. Then J146. J146 took us all the way into Vegas. Right here. And actually goes all the way to Hector. That worked out great. J146 to Hector, and then Bassett 4. That should be it. I believe it took the whole thing. It looks like it's routing it correctly. Okay. Yeah, it looks good. So now we've got a distance of 780.2. You want to toss in that 400 speed right here. You'll get your average 252. And add the 10 minutes to that for the taxi out. So 302. So now we...
I get the same SID and star, but I've got like a ton of other stuff in between there. It's like the thing's like this long. You did it with like...
Does it look written out just like that?
It's close, but it's different.
Because unless it's written just like that, you won't get the same exact line.
So that little jog that's down there closer to LA, is that Were you?
Right here?
Were you knowing I was gonna, yeah.
Well, if that's part of the SID, then
Oh, that jog right there, okay.
yeah, so we can figure out what it is. That's Hector, so that's where we're coming in at. And then it goes Hector to the Resser, Donna, and then Civet. So now remember, these aren't to scale, so they don't necessarily look how they look here. Yeah, but we can see, this is saying that it goes down to,
Oh, it's taking you to that Daggett one.
oh, you know what? That's why, yeah.
Because you put
When I was looking at this, I was thinking that was Hector, but this is Hector, so I was the one that messed that up. So really, once we, J146 here, so that goes into Vegas. Okay, so
We used a different, we didn't use Duck Creek, we used Red Table.
the red table,
Out of the Rocky 3.
DBL.
well, it might work better. Let's see.
It is shorter than what you have in there.
And I did Dove Creek straight to the Downey SID.
Yeah,
Okay,
and hers was shorter than ours.
so the Downey SID goes,
Yeah, we talked.
did the Downey have any FTC effect? FTC NOTAMs?
No, not when I.
Yeah, I was thinking this one, but I screwed up because I was thinking 146. I was thinking that was Hector, but it's really Daggett, and this one's Hector. So that's why it's messed up. So
Yeah. Because I had a whole
you did
list.
Dove Creek, but then you had 146 to Daggett.
To the down 4 is what I heard.
But what's your transition?
Straight from city, so.
Well, on that route, it wouldn't be possible.
Or no, it was the other one. She had one of them that didn't know.
What was your transition, Andrea?
I actually did two on this one because I was getting so frustrated. My original one was Rocky 3 departure to DVC to the J Route 146, and that took me right into LAX. I went back through because mine kept like starting to force things on me. So they did just the Rocky 3 to the Dove Creek straight into my SID at Downey.
Okay, but what's your transition though to your star?
Or to my star. And that's, it kept kicking me back out to the 146. But then it would force me straight into LAX.
Okay, so well, let's just look. What that was the Downey 4?
Yeah.
So that's this one using Hector. So that one you'd have the same problem as I'm having on this one because it uses Hector.
Okay.
But you guys
Red
used
Table to J6.
We did Red Table J6.
and yours went into Downey into Hector, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because Red Table connects to J60.
Yeah, because I think the 146 or the other one doesn't go to Hector, it goes to Daggett.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, the
J6
146. Yeah, that was the problem I just had now. So
And I see you.
yeah, because if you're at Red Table, then you have J60 right there. So we'll just back that up and we'll go to
DBL.
DBLJ60. Actually, to Daggett, right?
No, it's Hector.
Oh yeah.
I'm avoiding Daggett, remember?
Yeah, I keep getting them backwards.
And down.
And then DOW or WNE4. Okay. That one's just a little bit longer, but yeah, that works better though. Okay, yeah, that works good. Okay. So yeah, that one probably is, yeah, if yours was kicking you out, you were probably having the same problem. So you probably would need to switch to that J60, Andrea, is probably what happened.
Okay, yeah, because it was like, Or it would just take me straight into LAX on the J146.
Yeah, which we can't do.
Not in LA, so yeah. So
Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. So that means 810. And so from this point forward, now that you have your route, now that you've got, you know your SID, you know your star, you know your NOTAMs. I mean, obviously you need to jump in and pick a runway for LAX landing, right? You know the weather's good, so you're not going to have really many restrictions. None of the runways were closed. So at this point, I mean, you've got all of the information you need. Does anybody have questions on the weight and balance? I mean, that part you guys should probably be pretty comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
question, because you know, well, I guess, is it aft is only, forward's only 1,000 pounds, right?
It only holds 1,000, yeah.
It holds 1,000 pounds. So when you just say bags, that's just going, that's going.
You can put them wherever you want. You can put them in the forward or the aft. It's always best to just put them in the aft because it's bigger and they'll usually all fit there anyway. But yeah, the only time that you ever have to put it in one of the compartments is when I designate that it's 1,000 in the forward.
I was wondering if because you just usually designate that, and it's just saying bag.
On bags, I never designate though. So you can pick on the bags, but it's always best to just go aft. So the weight and balance. So taking what we have here, do you guys feel comfortable taking this information and figuring out the fuel?
Yeah.
Okay. You know it's 810 miles on your burn. That's going to be 258. So the 258 is the burn.
Right.
The ETA is just adding the 10 minutes for the taxi out. Okay, so 258, that's really going to be close to 4,000, 3,000. I mean, so it's really going to be just under 10,000 pounds on that burn.
Yeah.
Because we're 2 minutes short of just being able to go 4,000, 3,000, 3,000, right? Okay, so doesn't need an alternate. The only other question is does any part of this plan, would I need holding fuel for anything in here? No. Contingency fuel?
Oh, what were you asking about? What reserve or what was that thing you were asking yesterday? It was like the reserve fuel or something else it says here. Release fuel?
That would be the release fuel, would be all of the fuel added up.
Oh, okay.
And then it might say 250 pounds for taxi, and that would be meaning that 10 minutes of taxi out. But we haven't really covered that part yet, but that is.
So you wouldn't have added that in the minimum fuel for takeoff?
Yeah, because the minimum fuel for takeoff is the fuel that needs to be on board when he is on the runway. So that means that the taxi fuel would have already been burned at that point.
Oh, okay.
The release fuel is for when you're at the gate. The minimum fuel is when you're on the numbers on the runway.
Okay.
So, but this one, since you know that the 3,000 is 50 pounds per minute, right? If it's just 2 minutes short of that, all you got to do is you're going to know that that's 9,900 pounds for that burn without, you should be able to just go 4,000, 3,000, that's 7,000, plus another 3,000, then minus 100 because you're minusing 2 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's 2 minutes short of 3 hours complete total. So that would be 10,000 pounds if it were 3 hours exactly.
So now, are you going to, when you send us class on Monday, are you going to take this further, or are we just going to continue our flight plans up until weight balance?
Well, I want to make sure you guys have gotten those three all the way through all of these steps.
Okay.
So that just is depending on how you guys feel. I mean, going beyond this point is definitely better in class rather than me trying to do it online, and showing you. Yeah, so I would rather you guys just, and the thing is too, is like, I know we're coming up on when the class is supposed to end, but we also have, Andrea and Jaden, that are going to be coming down here as well, that it's going to go beyond the end of that part. So you guys are entitled to, be in on any of that as well. So if you guys need, I mean, it doesn't, it's supposed to be done like on, the 9th or 10th or whenever it is. That's basically when we get through all of the information, but that's not necessarily the deadline for when you need to feel like you're prepared, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's just the end of like the teaching. But if you still are wanting to, practice flight planning and do this or that. If you're waiting waiting a little bit more to prepare to take the final test and things like that, that's normal. Like, don't feel like, on the 10th you need to be, if you are ready, that's great. If you're not, that's also, yeah. So if you're not ready, but that's.
Well, you take a final test for the class too, right?
Yeah.
What day do we do that?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying, just whenever?
Yeah. The final test you can really take, the final test has to kind of be in person, the written part of it. The final flight plan part doesn't. So that's the only thing. It just, it has to be in person for the written portion of it. But the written portion is just going to be the questions from all the quizzes. And then in addition to that, there's a flight plan. But the flight plan doesn't necessarily have to be in person. That you could do at home. Like you could just email me, tell me you're ready. I send you the files like I do, like the packet, and then you do it, and you need to, you'll know that you got like 4 or 5 hours from that point to send it back to me. Okay. That's the final flight plan. So that part doesn't need to be in class necessarily. But as far as these next few days, Monday, how far on these last 3 plans, how does that sound good? Like if you guys just want to work on getting those 3 completed all the way through the weight and balance, and then Tuesday we start looking at, because there's not going to be any more quizzes. So Tuesday we start going beyond that and start doing simplified fuel, actual fuel, and the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, so we have just one more to do.
Okay.
Yesterday's.
Then just plan on that and finish those 3 up. We obviously already did the 1, so really there should be 4 that we have, because we did the 1 in class all the way through the weight and balance. That one should already just be done, or you can just go in and copy it to that point, if you want. And then the other 3 that I've given you.
So we need that one also.
Well, it doesn't have to be done at that point, but that's kind of what I'm giving Monday for, like to catch up the other 3 that I gave you. The first one we did was done before class even ended, so that one, if you just go back and watch the video, you can just write in the information
We need to do that, 'cause
if you want.
I went through the second one I
I
watched.
just have that one. So that
Went through that
Yeah.
process of the second one.
I'm sorry. When we're turning in our flight plans, are we like, you said we have to have 5 by the end of this, we're turning 5 flight plans into you, like 5 completed ones?
Yeah, just
They
like
have to be
the packet, like that.
paper?
Yeah, you would just give them to me, or you could scan them and email them to me.
Okay,
In fact, I would prefer the electronic,
okay.
because I have to upload them into the stuff on my thing that keeps all the records. So,
Awesome.
because if you give them to me paper, I just go home and scan them.
Okay.
So,
it's easier to write this way
yeah,
than sitting there and trying to get up to like look all pretty.
I
yeah,
have a scanner too if you need to.
yeah. In fact, scanning at work is really easy. That's where I scan a lot of my stuff. So, but yeah, so then plan on that. I won't send a new one for Monday. Okay, just work on getting the 3 that I gave you done all the way through the weight and balance. Okay, and then from that point, we'll work on getting them all the way done. So that would give you 4 that would be done all the way through weight and balance. And then on Tuesday, once we add in the next portion, you can just go back and work through those one by one. And then you'll get all of those completed, and then your final would count as your 5th.
Oh, okay.
So
is what we have to do after the weight and balance, does that take as long as this part, or have we done the majority? What percentage would you say we're?
I would say we're at, I would say we're probably, if you have it all the way ready up to through the weight and balance and ready to like actually jump in and get the next steps, I would say we're probably at close to halfway, maybe a little less. But I mean, the thing is it's kind of deceiving, because when you get really fast at these, you should really be able to do this start to finish in like an hour and a half, 2 hours total. So That's all the way from beginning to end. Once you get very comfortable doing them, like right now, I mean, they'll take, a lot longer, 4 or 5 hours. But even on your final and then in your practical exam, you have 4 or 5 hours. So
I was gonna say, it took me quite a bit to get the first sheet.
it's just the repetition of doing it, though. Once you know the steps, if you've got the steps down and you know exactly what you're looking for, you can get, like this one right here, in another 10 or 15 minutes, we could be done with the weight and balance. So.
Cool. Thanks,
Okay.
Adam.
Cool.
We'll get those finished up.
All right. We'll see everyone later.
If you feel like making more of the questions, are you free to
So what you say?
if you want to make more of the quiz questions or previews?